We're back. We're back. We're back. Week 3, episode 4. There's no crying in fantasy. Sean, what's going on?
Nothing much. I just been chilling, working, the same old, same old. What's been popping up with you?
Not much, man. Just trying to maintain through all these injuries. You know how it goes.
Yeah, man, I'm sitting pretty nice with my leagues. In 3 leagues. Let's see, I'm 2-0 on those. I'm 5-1 right now, so not bad, not
Not
bad.
bad. Not bad. Not bad. Yeah, I'm 2-0 and one, actually two, and then 1-1 and a few, and then 0-2 and one. So
Okay.
yeah, some ground to make up, but doing pretty well in most of my leagues.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got. If you have multiple leagues, like you have said you have 8. Uh, I'm sure you have like about 2 or 3 main leagues, and the rest is just like whatever.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah, man. So we could take a deep dive in these injuries. And I think we should go ahead and just go from the top of the list here. Nick Chubb. Let's just go ahead and hit that firing off. I mean, just a devastating injury, and I just hope this is not the end of his career. And I hope he gets well. But man, that was an awful injury, and it looks
Yeah.
like it may have a lot of fantasy impact here.
Yep.
Uh, so let me just get your thoughts first. Like, what do you think about Nick Chubb? Gone for the year and maybe possibly forever. I don't know.
I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, you're talking about one of the best running backs in fantasy, somebody that you probably drafted with your first or second round pick. That's hard to make up. And then you see today they made the signing of Kareem Hunt. I know that a lot of people spent a lot of money in Fab on Jerome Ford. I actually drafted Jerome Ford in probably 3 leagues, just in case that this happened, because Nick Chubb is so valuable to that team. I wanted the backup running back just in case this did happen. So I have Jerome Ford. I still think Jerome Ford is the man in that backfield. I think Kareem Hunt slides back into the role that he was in pass pro, passing downs, more of an up-tempo offense. But I think Jerome Ford is actually more capable than a lot of people are giving him credit for, because if you saw it in that game against Pittsburgh, he got a lot of work and he looked okay. And he was in on passing downs as well.
He had a big run too, didn't he? He
Yeah.
had like it was a very big run. When it was like 50 yards, something of that nature.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt?
Well, I'm not big on Jerome Ford. The former Cincinnati Bearcat and former Alabama Crimson Tide there.
Yep.
Um, I'm not big on Ford because of the Hunt signing. I know a lot of people have been telling me this, especially in my Dynasty League, where I have Nick Chubb, and, like I was saying earlier, now I'm just going to put him on IR. I mentioned that in the group chat, but it's like a lot of them guys in my league, they're big on Jerome Ford, and like I know he had a good game against Pittsburgh, but I'm just not as high on him from a PPR perspective if Kareem Hunt is now going to be in that backfield. Now, do I think it may take maybe 2-3 weeks for Hunt to get back into groove because he's been missing games and he really hasn't been playing? Or, I mean, I guess he's just been working out by himself. So, I mean, yes, I do think that. But once Hunt gets in the groove, especially if Ford does not perform well, I think Hunt's going to end up taking over most of the carries because eventually he will, and he's going to be healthier and he's going to be fresh. So that's been the problem with Hunt, sort of, and that's why he hasn't been able to take over bulk of the carries in the past with Cleveland. So I mean, I just feel like eventually Hunt's the veteran, and he may take over bulk of them touches, predominantly in the passing game. But we'll see what happens. I know a lot of people probably used a lot of their fab money on Jerome Ford this week.
Yeah, I still like Jerome Ford, and I think that backfield is capable of having two, you know, productive backs as they've had before. We've seen where Kareem Hunt is still viable as maybe a RB3 flex option and Nick Chubb was your RB1. I think you'll find out whether Kareem Hunt is going to be maybe your RB2 or if Jerome Ford winds up being a flex option for you.
Right, and he's certainly worth, you know, I would say about 20 or maybe 30 fab money if your league does do that, and that he's certainly worth a waiver pickup, and maybe he's even worth a start, like you just said, flex RB2 in the next week or two. But as far as a long term sustaining success, I just don't see it happening, especially with Deshaun Watson struggling. They might run the ball more, but you know, Conklin's out for the whole year now, right?
Yeah.
And you got Willis. He's a little banged up. He's questionable. So I just don't know if that run block is going to be as good because Chubb, you know, he was not if the best running back in the league as far as a pure runner. He was definitely top three, top five. So he breaks a lot of tackles. He has great vision, and when he gets in that open field, he has the speed to take off. I think Jerome has potential, but he's not going to be Nick Chubb. I think Kevin Stefanski is going to have to do a lot of scheming here. So, we'll see. And I really think it depends on Watson's success. He has not been looking good. And, if you're in PPR leagues, you want running backs to be involved in the passing game. So
Yep.
I don't think that's there in Cleveland.
Yeah. We'll see what happens, but if you're out there and Kareem Hunt or Jerome Ford are still on your wire, pick up both. They're both rosterable at this point.
Right. And then we can go to another big question mark here. Anthony Richardson, he's already questionable with a concussion, did not practice. He's still in protocol. Gardner Minshew is getting them reps to prepare to be a starter on Sunday. So, how does that impact fantasy for maybe like a guy like Pittman? Um, a guy like him. What do you think about that?
I am not starting any Colts wide receivers, especially in this game if Anthony Richardson is out. I probably wouldn't have started him anyway if he was playing. I might have started Anthony Richardson himself because of the rushing aspect and the rushing touchdowns, but they're going against the Ravens on the road. I just don't see it. I don't like Minshew in this game, so it's not a favorable matchup. I think if you have anybody on the Colts, the only favorable matchup that you might have is Moss because he's going to get the touches and the opportunities. But, I just don't see it. I've been wrong with the Colts before where Pittman is blown up and gone off. But, if you're dealing with Minshew and, possibly on the road against the Ravens, I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Richardson has looked good as a fantasy option the past 2 weeks at quarterback because he's just a dual threat guy. He can get it done on the ground, and honestly, he hasn't looked too bad as a passer.
Yep.
But Zach Moss is somebody I would like to talk about later in the show. I'm gonna save him for that little part of the show because I have a big thing for him. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Gardner Minshew, I know it's at Ravens, but it's Gardner Minshew. He's like the new age Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, so you never know what might happen, and I think there's going to be more passing involved, less running. I know last year, when he took over for Hurts for a game or two, the Eagles really passed the ball a lot, and versus than running the ball. So that's going to be more carries for your running backs. That's going to be more targets for your wide receivers. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. I know the Ravens is a tough matchup, but honestly, I thought the Colts would be worse than they are now. They're 1-1. So, I mean,
Yeah.
who knows? It's week 3. We'll see what happens.
Well, I am looking at it, and Baltimore does have the sixth best defense for wide receivers. So there is some opportunity there. I'm not sold from that Minshew perspective on the road, against Baltimore. It just doesn't strike me as appealing. But we'll see. We'll see.
Right, right. I guess I'm just being a little optimistic because you're absolutely right. I mean, it is a hard thing to really start. I mean, I picked him up in my dynasty league just because it's very deep and we play three quarterbacks in the starting lineup, so I picked him up just for a play. Now, Joe Burrow is questionable with a calf injury. Head coach Zach Taylor says it's hard to say when he will be available. Um, that's not a good sign. Their backup quarterback is Jake Browning, right? Out of
Yeah, Jake
Washington.
Brown.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that affects Jamar Chase, who has been struggling. T. Higgins, who was very good this past week, that's going to affect his value. But could be a big opportunity for Joe Mixon to mix up a lot of stuff in their offense. So I mean, what do you think from that perspective? Joe Burrow possibly not playing this week.
Yeah, this isn't good. From a wide receiver perspective, I think you downgrade all your wide receivers. You're not sitting Jamar Chase. You're not sitting T. Higgins. You're probably not going to start Tyler Boyd. So I think you just kind of have to roll with it right now and see how it goes, see how good Browning is. You maybe wind up with a favorable matchup where they're going to be throwing, like you said. But it's just not good. It's not what you drafted these wide receivers to be. From a Joe Mixon perspective, I think you do get more opportunities in the pass game from Joe Mixon than you've had in recent weeks because they're going to have to use him to kind of keep the defense honest against Jake Browning. So you could see more value in that run game from a Joe Mixon perspective, and maybe potentially Chase Brown.
Mm. And because I don't think Chris Evans is back from injury.
No, he's still injured. Yeah.
Because Chris Evans is a guy I was looking at on the waiver wire before the season even started. He was supposed to take over the Shamaje Piron role,
Yep.
but that didn't really happen. So we got two lines here, both questionable. David Montgomery with a thigh injury did not practice. Amon Ra St. Brown questionable with a toe day to day, but he did not practice. That sounds great for one of my guys, Jameer Gibbs,
Mm-hmm.
which I have in one of my fantasy teams. Uh, but maybe not so great for Jared Goff. So those two may take an impact on that side of the ball for the Lions. I have what else? I have a whole list. I mean, I can go rapid fire if you want me to, and whatever pops out, you can stop me.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Let's go.
Justin Hill questionable with a toe. Dawson Knox, questionable, back, didn't practice. Miles Sanders, questionable with the pectoral. He was limited though, so you might
Okay.
see Chuba
That,
Herbert there.
yeah, that's the one. If you have Miles Sanders and Chuba Herbert is out there, go get Chuba. Um, Miles Sanders has always been injured. It happens once a year at least. He's probably going to be out, if not a week, multiple weeks. Chuba was already getting involved in the run game and the pass game in that offense. So if you watch the game against New Orleans, Chuba was getting involved late in that game,
He
and he
was.
looked pretty good. So I say, if you have Miles Sanders, go get Chuba. If you need a running back for this week, go get Chuba.
Yeah, I think last year when Chuba, started for a game or two, he did look good in those games as well. So he broke out a game or two last year. So yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely worth a play if you are desperate for a running back. So that's a good look right there. Amari Cooper, questionable. He was questionable for Monday night, but he ended up playing. I
He's
think
going
he
to play.
plays again. You,
Yeah, he's going
you,
to play.
oh, he's not playing.
No, he's going to play.
Oh, he's gonna play for sure, like he did on Monday night. I ended up benching him. I should not bench
I
him at
did
all.
too. I benched him too.
It's okay. I started Rashid Raheed because I benched him on Sunday before the actually Saints played Monday night too. But still, I started Rashid, so it's not bad. Um, let's see. Christian Watson. We might be able to see appearance. He's still questionable, hamstring problems. Do you think we see him this week?
I think so. I think you do. It's going to depend on the Friday injury report, but I think you have a good chance of seeing him, and I think that impacts. It doesn't impact Romeo Dubes. It impacts Jaden Reed.
Yeah, correct. Because that slots Reed back down to wide receiver 3 and 4.
Yep.
Uh, so, yeah, I mean, I have Watson in one of my leagues. He's been sitting on my bench for a couple weeks now, so I'm ready for him to get them wide receiver 1 numbers. But he does play against my Saints, so I don't know how I feel about
I
that.
think you have to temper your
so,
expectations with Watson starting out. He's going to be a little bit slow to ramp up, so don't expect the wide receiver one numbers. Maybe wide receiver three to start off with, and then slowly, gradually, he'll start working up.
yeah, I think he'll definitely be on a snap count because, like I said, they're playing the Saints, so it's going to be very hard to pass against that secondary. You know, we do have problems with speed guys. I will say that because we'll get pass interference on some of these speed guys because they'll end up burning Alante or Paulson Adebo. So I mean, because they like to go for the ball, so that may work in favor for Watson, but he's coming off the hamstring injury. So, yeah, I agree. Temper your expectations.
Yep.
Um, Aaron Jones, that's another Packer here. Questionable hamstring, did not practice. I think it's safe to assume you might just, he's going to be hurt. He's not going to play.
I think he's going to play.
You think he's going to play?
Yeah, I think he was close to playing last week. They already said that in the first game he wanted to go back in, but they were kind of managing him. So I think that they were just taking precautions in last week's game. So I do think that you see him, but have a backup plan just in case he's not in there.
Right. So that means AJ Dillon, which we kind of don't like.
Yeah, I would look for
Yeah.
another another running back.
CJ Stroud, questionable. I think he plays.
I think he plays.
He had an awesome week last week. Travis Etienne, questionable cramps.
I think he
He'll
plays.
play, but he may be limited in the game if his cramps start to ramp up. So that's certainly, even though he may be active, that's certainly to think about. It wouldn't hurt to maybe stash Tank Bigsby. I don't know. If
I
you're
think
really
Tank is a good flex play this week because the matchup is so good that I think that they're going to be running all over Houston. But I do think
you would
ETN
think.
plays. Yeah, you would think. But I think ETN is a good play this week if he is playing.
Right. Chiefs defense. I thought this was interesting. Sneed, Willie Gay, Nick Bolton, all questionable. Nick Bolton, Willie Gay did not practice today. So, I mean, I did pick up Chiefs defense, but now I'm starting to regret it because these three may be out. That's something to look at. Especially, I forgot who the Chiefs play. Don't they play like
They play
who they play?
Chicago.
Chicago. That's why I
Yeah.
picked them up.
Yep. I picked him up in 3 leagues. I'm playing them. Doesn't matter if all 3 are out. I'm still playing the Chiefs.
At the end of the day, I think it's all about Chris Jones. He's the engine to that defense. As long as he's playing, that defense is worth a start.
Yep.
Let's see. Isaiah Pacheco, questionable, did not practice.
I'm
Tony,
concerned.
how was it?
I said I'm concerned about Pacheco.
So did he play last game?
He did, but he pulled up with a hamstring injury.
Mm.
So this is what you're seeing on the injury report now. I'm a little concerned. I don't think he plays this week. So we'll monitor it throughout the week. But, if you have Pacheco and you're planning on playing him, look at CEH. I think CEH might be a viable option. McKinnon, I think, is going to be a good option.
Especially PPR.
I just think they're going to get up so much on Chicago that, you're not going to see a lot of McKinnon. You're going to see more CEH on the ground.
Well, if you really take a deep dive into it, because this Chiefs wide receiver core has been awful, So because I was about to mention Kadarius Toney and Richie James did not practice either. So I mean the lack of receiver options outside of Kelsey is very bad. So have you what you've been seeing out of Mahomes? He's been targeting the running backs in the passing game a lot. That dates back to last year. So yeah, I think McKinnon, Edwards, Hilaire will get a lot of work.
Yep.
So Jacoby Myers did practice, so that's a good sign. He was in concussion protocol, and if he did practice, he plans on playing. And if he plays, I think he's worth a flex.
I think so too. Yeah.
He looked great week 1. We were talking about it last show. So
let me ask you this. So Hunter Renfro cannot get a target, but Jacoby Myers can get 11.
well,
What is going on?
I mean, I guess Josh McDaniels just doesn't like the slot. He doesn't care about the slot position, which is weird because he's from, the Belichick tree, which they love guys like Hunter Renfro.
Wes Welker, yeah,
right.
Julian Edelman. I don't get it.
But the thing is, Julian Edelman and Wes Welker, those are some world-class athletes. I don't think Hunter Renfro is on that same level. Now, as far as route running, he was probably right there with them, but he's not the same athlete as that too. So I get it. I do get it. He's not going to be a big run after the catch guy. You know what I'm saying? So, I know he's been a punt returner or a kickoff returner before, but I just don't think he's as good as an athlete as those two were. So I mean, I guess it does kind of make sense.
Yeah.
Austin Eckler, questionable, did not practice.
Not playing.
Bad news.
Not playing, yeah.
And I was so disappointed at Josh Kelly, though. He got, RB1 snaps, and, he disappointed there. You think he has the bounce back week if Eckler does not play?
So who do they have this week? The Chargers have...
I forgot.
Vikings. I think that he could have a bounce back week this week. They played the Titans last week. I mean, that's the run defense in the league.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, I say don't panic on Josh Kelly yet. Start him this week if you have him. If you have Austin Eckler, see if he bounced back this week.
For sure. Devontae Parker, questionable, limited.
He's playing.
He is playing, and he's been playing 100% of the snaps. He's been on the field 100% of the time. I looked that up, which is crazy to me. Which he's the number 1 out of all wide receivers who's played the most snaps, if you didn't know that.
And he's one of Mac Jones' favorite targets, too.
Well, Kendrick Bourne would argue with that, but Hunter Henry has been picking up some steam. I picked him up in all 3 of my leagues. It's been a great start.
Out of the wide receivers, yes, Kendrick Bourne, but
he didn't have a good game last game, though.
He didn't, and when you see when Devontae Parker plays, they target Devontae Parker a lot.
And he had a good game last game.
He had a great game. Yeah,
he was making some great catches. I watched that game. No Juju Smith-Schuster. So
no. Bench cut Juju. If you have Juju, cut him.
He'd go TikTok on the waiver wire. But Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, questionable. Tyreek Hill was just ruled questionable before the show started.
I'm concerned about Tyreek. I mean, I'm not concerned about Tyreek. I'm concerned about Waddle.
Yes, I am concerned about Waddle because he ended up leaving that game against New England, didn't he?
In concussion protocol, yeah.
And watch out for my boy, River Claycraft. And I've been telling you about him, man. And he might get some targets his way.
I think it's more of a Berrios. I think Berrios
takes a lot more snaps. I did notice that. But as far as targets, River gets a good bit of them. Jamal Williams, Taysom Hill, questionable. Jamal Williams, most likely not going to play. I can tell you that now. Taysom Hill, he's going to be active, but I doubt he will be limited. Here's a big one. And if you want to go pick him up, you probably should go pick him up right now. because he's a full goal now. He's fully healthy and he's preparing to start for this game. And
I
yeah, I
know
think you
he
know who I'm talking about, right?
Kendra Miller.
Yes, it's time now. He might break out this week, but we got Kamara coming back next week, don't we? So he's only
Yeah.
suspended for 3 games. So he may break out. And if he does, let's say if he does break out, what do you think his fantasy outlook is, even with Kamara? What do you think? I think that could be because you look at it back in the day, Mark Ingram, AK, good fantasy duo. So I mean, Miller could be the next Mark Ingram. We'll see. I don't know.
I think Miller will have some value, but I'm a little concerned about this week. I think this week may be Tony Jones.
Tony Jones, he started getting to the groove late. The run blocking got better, but the problem with the Saints right now, and the main problem with their offense, is the offensive line. Um, it does seem like they do get better late in games when it counts, but I think that's some of the problems with the New Orleans Saints offense. Now, I think some of that's predicated on the offensive coaching because I think the play calling of Pete Carmichael is so stale. He's a guy as far as play calling. You know, if it works one time, he's going to keep running over and over. And I'm ready for him to be gone because I think this could be an explosive offense with the
It can
right
be.
play caller. We'll see. It may happen. We'll see what happens with that. Now, Jets. The Jets. This is a big one for the Jets. Both tackles, Mekhi Becton, Dwayne Brown, both questionable, did not practice. Brees Hall, questionable, was limited. That's if those two tackles don't play, that's a huge loss for the Jets, and it's not looking good for New York.
Yeah, I think Brees plays. I think the tackles play as well.
They have to,
And
in my opinion.
this is actually a favorable matchup
Hmm.
for if you have Brees Hall. This is a favorable matchup. And I'll get into it a little bit later when we go in to start sits, but I think Brees plays, and I think you should play him.
And then we can go ahead and wrap this injuries because I know we've been on here for a lot, but there's just a tons of injuries. Like I went on the injury report and it's just every single team is
Yeah,
dealing with injuries. It's
it's,
crazy.
it's
Um,
long.
I think the two biggest names left on my list is Brandon Ayuk and DK Metcalf. Um, so Brandon Ayuk questionable with a shoulder. You think that affects anything? You think he plays or?
I think he plays, but I think if you have other options, I would play other options because one, it's a Thursday game. He's coming off injury. He may be used as a decoy. So I would have another option if I could. If you have to play him, you have to play him.
Well, I do recommend if Ayuk, if you get news that Ayuk is either limited for the next game or out, it would not be a bad idea to pick up. Was it Jawan
Juwan
Jennings?
Jennings. Yep.
Purdy likes him. He targets him, so it would not be a bad idea to pick him up. And if you have to, maybe he'd be a solid flex play. Uh, DK Metcalf, questionable. Uh, the wide receivers for Seattle's been a little wishy-washy. So what do you think about that, DK Metcalf?
I think DK plays. If DK is in your lineup, you got to leave him there. I think he plays though.
And we'll get into more about Seattle because I got to talk about Tyler Lockett later on in my starts and sits. But let's go ahead transition over to week 2 breakouts. I list the top 10 performers on this list here, and I'm just gonna go in order: Daniel Jones, Keenan Allen, our boy Puka, Mike Evans, Steelers defense, Brian Robinson, T. Higgins, Kirk Cousins, Kylan Williams, Nico Collins. Those are your top 10 performers in fantasy. So, any names that popped out, what I just mentioned, or do you have somebody else that kind of broke out but that didn't quite crack the top 10?
No, I don't have anybody else. I mean, DeAndre Swift, of course.
That's
Um,
right. That's a
yeah,
good one. Yeah.
yeah, DeAndre Swift. I think that's the man. In the backfield now. I don't think that they can deny it. So if you have him, you start him. We called the Bucks wide receivers last week. We told you to start them. I, you know, I think we're seeing that offense is a little bit more high powered than we thought it was going to be starting out. Um, let's see who else. Jerome Ford, of course. Uh, that's really it for last week. I don't have anybody else that I want to add. Josh Reynolds. That was the
Yep.
one. Josh Reynolds. If Josh Reynolds is out there, and especially with Amon being banged up, I say go pick up Josh Reynolds.
Uh, I'll throw in a deep sleeper here. Brandon Johnson for the Denver Broncos. He seems like I think he's been targeted. He's second on the team in targets for Denver, and I like what I've seen. When he touches the ball, you know, sometimes it's a score. So it seems like, Russell Wilson has favored him in some areas in the field, and it seems like Sean Payton likes to scheme him in certain ways. So that's a deep sleeper. Daniel Jones, don't buy in that hype. They play the Arizona Cardinals. Um,
They
he,
played
but
two. They played a bad defense and a team that forgot that they were supposed to be tanking in the first half.
right, right. But shout out to my boy Kylan Williams. He got Akers traded today to the Vikings. He took his spot. He
Let,
looks
let,
like
let's
a
talk.
prominent
Let's
running
stay
back.
here. Let's
What's
stay
up?
here. What are your thoughts on Akers going to the Vikings?
Well, I was going to mention it. I was thinking about mentioning it earlier in the show, but I think this is the perfect timing. Akers to the Vikings. I was just having this conversation in one of my leagues right before the show, and all the guys in my league, they think he's the perfect fit just because of Kevin O'Connell, and because that's their guy. Apparently, they like each other. Um, I mean, I still think he's going to split carries with Madison. I think Madison's going to end up getting the touchdowns. He might not get the yardage, but I think he's going to get the touchdowns because they're not going to not use Madison on the goal line in the red zone area if they want to get short yardage or whatever. I don't think Akers is going to be that guy. I would be really surprised if Akers turns into something. I mean, he's not as good as Dalvin Cook. I mean, none of those running backs the Vikings have is going to be as good as Dalvin Cook has been over so many years. I mean, and on top of that, they don't run the ball. They don't. The Vikings do not run the ball, and you know that's the proof is Kirk Cousins. You look at his stats; they're 0-2. You figure Kirk Cousins would have been horrible, but Kirk Cousins has actually had great stats. It's just their defense is horrible. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and they're having to constantly pass the ball to keep the team, you know, in the game. So I don't know. I've never been a big Akers fan. Now, if I was desperate for running backs, of course I'm going to try my best. Maybe spend 10 to 20 fab money on them, but that's about it.
Yeah, I don't like the trade. I don't like the fit. Um, I think we've seen Cam Akers and we've seen him have spurts of, being a good running back, but the the, the footage is there. He's not that great, and I don't think he changes this Vikings offense. I don't think, like you said, once Dalvin Cook left, they're not utilizing the run game, and their defense is so bad that they're going to be throwing a lot. So how much are they really going to be using their running backs in the passing game? So I think it's a move that they made to try to get him out of, LA, see if it fits there, but I just don't see a lot of upside of him being there.
No, I don't. And I think, this puts Madison in kind of a better situation, in my opinion, because he does not have to take the full workload. And I think that will make him better, in my honest opinion. Now, as far as fantasy, um, you know, I don't know. I don't think fantasy wise, they may be okay to have on your bench. Uh, maybe a flex play here and there. You know, I,
If
I
if,
don't
if
think
I
that's, you know,
if I have Cam Akers, I'm calling somebody and I'm looking to trade right now. I think this is the perfect opportunity for you to try to trade Cam Akers.
Well, I think you wait because he's gonna have a good game where everybody's gonna overrate him a lot, and that's what happened last year when he came back after his hiatus. Because Sean McVay does not like the dude. Uh, he had a game or two where he looked very good fantasy wise. So I think that's gonna happen here soon enough. But he's eventually going to be who Cam Akers is, which is a bust of a running back he has been in the NFL. Out of Florida State. I'm sorry, AJ, Florida State, you know. But yeah. But yeah, Nico Collins is a guy, that's steadily becoming a consistent, wide receiver 2. If you run 2 wide receivers in your league, he's definitely a wide receiver 2 starter for any team. Flex at worst. He's been looking great. Robert Woods, surprisingly, has been consistent as well.
Yep.
So the Texans' offense is definitely something to keep an eye on because CJ Stroud has been looking good, especially compared to Bryce Young. But I think, CJ Stroud has better options. And that's another guy we forgot to mention on the injury report. Bryce Young did not practice today. I forgot
Yeah,
about that.
that was a new injury. Yep.
Which, I have in my Dynasty League. I wasn't expecting him to do much this year anyways. But be patient with him because obviously that team is not ready offensively as far as weapons to provide what he needs to be a successful quarterback right away.
Yep.
So I say let's go ahead and transition to our week 3 starts and sits. You want to go first? You want me to go first?
So I mentioned Brees. Start Brees. New England has the 7th worst rushing defense. I think you've seen some running backs like Mostert go off on New England. You saw Kenneth Gainwell do pretty decent against New
That's
England
true.
as well. So I say start Brees. Squeaky Will gets the grease. He complained about only getting 4 touches last week. They're going to look for ways to protect Zach Wilson. So I think this is a week that, Brees is going to get the touches. Brees is a start for me. Seahawks, Kenneth Walker. I think Kenneth Walker is a start. You talked about Tyler Lockett. I think just about everybody on Seattle's offense right now is a start going against Carolina. I think that they are going to be up in that game. Kenneth Walker is going to get a lot of volume at the end of that game. They're also at home. They are favorites to win. So I say start Kenneth Walker. The Chiefs, of course. I think everybody on the Chiefs, just about, even the defense going against Chicago. We talked about Pacheco being out. I think CEH is a viable option if Pacheco is out because I think they're going to be up by a lot. Defense is going to be dominant in that game going against Chicago. So
that game could get ugly.
That game could get very ugly.
Because their defensive coordinator quit today, if you didn't know that.
Too. Yeah, it's just a mess all around. And I think this is a bounce back game for Josh Jacobs. Going against the Steelers, I think the Steelers are like 3rd or 4th worst against rushing. May not be that great for Jimmy Garoppolo, so look for Josh Jacobs to get it going on the ground. So fire up Josh Jacobs.
Right, and those are some good starts there. My 3 starts, I just have 3. Dak Prescott, at Arizona, I think that's an easy start right there. I know the first 2 games, fantasy-wise, it has not equate to a lot of points just because that defense has been crazy for Dallas. So they've been up by defense. So, but, I think Arizona will give them a fight. I don't think it's going to be a close game, but I think they're going to give them a fight. So I think it will allow Dak Prescott to do what he does, which is, score a lot of touchdowns, maybe throw an interception or 2. But I think he's a good play because it's versus Arizona. Good matchup.
Can I mention somebody who I think is a good flex option in that game?
Yes.
Who's not on everybody's radar? Michael Wilson for Arizona.
Out of Stanford.
Yeah. He's coming along slowly, and it's going to take some time. but you have Trayvon Diggs, who is going to be against probably Marquise Brown. Look for Michael Wilson to get involved. We've been waiting for Rondell Moore. Rondell Moore hasn't done it. Michael Wilson's targets are increasing week to week, so look for him to be involved in this game.
And I think that's a good tidbit there because, Brown has been targeted a lot. He's the number one target for Arizona. And shout out to Josh Dobbs, man. He has not looked half bad, the
Yeah.
former NASA employee there. My number 2 guy, Zach Moss, and this is where I wanted to bring him up. I know he plays at Baltimore, but, he didn't play week 1 against who they played week 1. I forgot who they played week 1. Indy.
Jacksonville.
Anyways, he played week 2. He had 20.7 points in PPR, 98% snap rate, and I think that increases to 100 if Anthony Richardson does not play. And that's where I think he's a start here. He had 18 carries for 88 yards last week, 4.89 per carry, and a touchdown. He also saw some work in the passing game, 4 targets, caught all 4 targets for 19 yards. So I expect him, to receive a lot of the workload for Indy, just because he may be their only serviceable rusher, especially if Richardson goes down. So I think that's why he's a good start this week. Tyler Lockett, especially if DK does not play or if he's limited. He saw a bunch of targets last week against Detroit, and I know that went into overtime, but, he was trusted in a lot of plays. Most of it was short yardage, but he had 2 touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns last week, which I thought was eye-popping to me because, they got DK. They got the Rook, who, are bigger targets, and you steadily see Lockett get the targets in the red zone for a touchdown. They play against Carolina, who, looked pretty well against the Saints, and their defense seems to be rocking as well. But no Shaq Thompson as linebacker. You're going to have to find a new leader. I don't know how that's going to affect everything else.
Yep.
I think he's a good start. Now, let's transition to sits here, and I'll go ahead and go first on this. I got 3 of them. Deshaun Watson, again, I think you continue to sit him. Do not play him. He plays against Tennessee this week. I think that's a bad matchup for him. No Nick Chubb. Maybe start Amari Cooper, but don't start Deshaun Watson. I don't, something's not there with him. The Browns have made a mistake, and you see it when Baker's balling out in Tampa, and it looks real bad right now. So Deshaun Watson, hit the alert button. Do not start him. Garrett Wilson versus New England. New England did a phenomenal job on Tyreek Hill. Now, that opened up, targets for Jalen Waddle, and that run game for Miami was great. So you might be on to something with Breece Hall there, because, Mustard, like you were saying, balled out last week against New England. Yeah, don't start Garrett Wilson. Zach Wilson has been struggling. The offensive line's banged up. Don't start Garrett Wilson. Tampa Bay defense. I know they got the Eagles at home, but Devontae Smith has been burning a lot of folks. A.J. Brown, it's due for him to have a big game. You talk about your boy Swift. I think this is the game where the Eagles fire on all cylinders, because I know people have been saying they've been looking slow, even though they're 2-0. It's Tampa Bay. I know they're 2-0, but their magical little run is not going to last forever. It's Tampa Bay. It's Baker Mayfield. Come on here. You look at Tampa Bay's defense. They had 10 points in week 1, 18 points in week 2. I think that's kind of an anomaly there. I know Todd Bowles is a good defensive coach, but I don't see Tampa Bay being a good team as far as a fantasy outlook overall. So I think the Eagles are going to bust some heads down there in Tampa Bay. So don't start Tampa Bay defense.
I hope so.
Right.
Let me give you a couple. So My first one is Jerome Ford. I think everybody picked Jerome Ford up, but this is not the week. Do not start Jerome Ford this week, please. Um, Romeo Dubes going against the Saints. Don't like it. Do not start Romeo Dubes. I think the Saints are going to.
What about Jordan Love? Do you start Jordan Love?
I don't think you start Jordan Love.
Mm.
Saints defense has been pretty stout, and I don't know if it's just who they've gone against, but um, I I don't like the matchup for the Packers. Even if Christian Watson is back, I think you sit a lot of your Packers wide receivers. Um, the other one is Brian Robinson. I don't like Brian Robinson this week going against the Bills. And then on the other side, I don't like James Cook going against the Commanders. I think that both offenses are going to be airing it out. So I say bench those running backs. And then from a defensive perspective, this is a tough one. Um, I'm going to say, and this is going to shock a lot of people, I think you got to sit the Cowboys this week. Um,
Mm.
it- you know, we talk a lot about Arizona, but their offense has looked pretty good in the first half of games and of who they've gone up against. And I think that this is a trap game for the Cowboys defense. I think you're going to see Arizona put up a fight. That doesn't mean that the Cowboys are not going to win the game. I have the Cowboys winning the game, but I think Arizona can put up enough points to make the Cowboys defense a little bit fantasy irrelevant this week.
Right, and then let me say this about the Saints defense because I can give you some insider. The Saints defense. The last two they played against the last two teams. The Panthers. That was kind of a gimme game for them. Tennessee. But Tannehill did look good last week, so. Uh, I think the Saints defense is a top 5 defense, but they're not as good as Dallas. I think that's my honest opinion. So I think when you have teams going up against Saints defense, I think it's playable to a certain extent. It just depends on who the player is. If I'm as Packers, uh, the people I would be starting would probably be, Aaron Jones if he plays, because
Yeah.
that's going to be his security blanket when the pressure comes. Because the pressure from New Orleans, their defensive pressure has been really the key for that defense. So, if they can find a way to block that pressure, maybe they can get some passes off. So let's go on to our last little segment here, our week 3 sleepers here. So who are some of your week 3 sleepers?
Oh, who are my week 3 sleepers? That's a good question. Uh, Tutu Atwell. We've talked about Tutu, um, but I think that this is a big 2-2 game going against the Bengals. Um, I think that the Rams are going to have the advantage here, especially on offense. So I say Puka has blown up so much that I think defenses are going to start keying in on Puka. So look for Tutu to kind of get open and blow up in this game. And even though I don't like them against the Chiefs, I think this is a DJ Moore game, just because they're going to have to pass to keep up with them. So
He's been quiet.
look for DJ. He had a good game last week, but I just think this is the week for DJ Moore because he's just going to get a lot of opportunity, a lot of volume. Um, who else do I have? One sleeper that I have here is Salman Ahmed. I've
He
talked
looked
about him
good.
before, but he looked good last week. He's clearly the number 2 back in that offense, and it looks like they want to use him in the pass game. I think if you see Miami start to get down or start to struggle against the Broncos, I say fire him up if you need a running back, if you're desperate, because he could get a couple catches out the backfield. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be a close game with the Broncos. And you may see Salmon get a little bit more involved if he's healthy. I know he's on the injury report, but he's a clear number 2 in that offense.
Right, and as far as Miami goes, I think last week against New England really unlocked new territory for Miami because last year they struggled to run the ball, and they were not a running team at all. But if you look at Mike McDaniel's background, you know, he's been a run game coordinator. He's been a running backs coach. So he knows running backs. He just have had, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill as wide receivers. So they've been very wide receiver heavy passing the ball. But, I think last week showed that the Dolphins can be a good running team when teams start to try to lock down Tyreek Hill. Because if you're paying attention to Tyreek Hill, okay, we'll just run the ball down your throat, which they did. Mustard looked really good, and Ahmad looked good as well.
Yeah.
So I have three sleepers. I kind of mentioned already two of them, so I'm gonna start with the one I didn't mention. Jalen Warren from Pittsburgh. That's your sleeper right there. Because Najee Harris, he's been, a little shitty in my opinion. But here's some stats for you. Week 1 versus San Francisco, he was RB 40. Only 40% of the snaps. Week 2 versus Cleveland, he was RB 19. Jumped up to RB 19. Only snap count 3%. But here's the thing. He has the most targets out of all the running backs in the NFL in the passing game. So he's getting that passing game work. You're seeing he's getting more snaps. I think eventually the Steelers will move off from Harris, giving Warren more snaps. That's what the fans want. I think the Steelers or the Steeler fans are tired of Harris. I think it's a move they need to make because Matt Canada is under fire as the offense coordinator there. So I think Jalen Warren is a sleeper. Now, Zach Moss, already mentioned him earlier. I traded for him in one of my leagues. I
Okay.
traded. Okay, don't think I'm crazy here. And this might sound stupid what I did here, but I got Zach Moss and a next year's second round pick. This is in Dynasty League, but I gave up my first round pick.
Ooh.
Because listen here, because Nick Chubb went down, so I was desperate for running backs, and all I had left was, I believe, Javonte Williams, been shaky, Dalvin Cook, been really shaky, Kamara still on suspension. So I really had no options here, and this is a deep league. So I traded for Zach Moss. I still have 3 second round picks, so I'm not, and I'm 2-0 in that league, so I feel good because like I said, 98% he was on snap, 98% of the snaps.
Yeah.
He's getting the work. I think he was a good investment, and I do not see Jonathan Taylor back with Indianapolis at all this year.
I don't
So
either.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So somebody's going to have to run the ball. So
Yeah.
Zach Moss definitely a sleeper. And then, like I said earlier, Nico Collins. I think if you're looking for a wide receiver 2, if you're really desperate for a wide receiver 1, maybe try to target Nico Collins on the down low because he's not a big name. People like to look at names when trading. They don't necessarily look at the snaps. They don't really take a deep dive in all these stats like I'm doing. They just look at the name. Be like, oh, that guy sucks. But he really doesn't. Nico Collins has been steadily consistent. He seems like he's the number 1 wide receiver there. If you're looking for another wide receiver to start, definitely target him in trades. Maybe you can get him on the cheap. That's a guy to target. Or vice versa. Maybe he does, have high regard in the trading market. Maybe you can get something off for him right now, and he may do worse. Get rid of him while you can. It depends how you feel him. Vice versa. In my opinion, I think you target him.
I think so too. I would target Nico Collins in the trade. Yeah. I got one more for you, and this is more of a tip for anybody who has Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is playing on Monday night. If you need a quarterback and you're not sure if Joe Burrow is starting, pick up Baker Mayfield. Eagles secondary. I think the Eagles are going to win that game, but the Eagles secondary is terrible. They just lost Avonte Maddox as well. James Bradbury, I haven't seen if he practiced yet, but he was on concussion protocol last week. They're giving up almost the most yards to wide receivers, and you're facing two great wide receivers from a fantasy perspective. Pick up Baker Mayfield in case Joe Burrow is not playing. I think he's a solid start for this week as well.
Hell, I mean, you could even pick up Mac Jones. He's been QB8 this year so far. I mean, just and I think, obviously we don't think he's the greatest quarterback, but you know, he's he's getting the passing attempts for fantasy relevance. So I mean, if you're just looking for a spot play, maybe look at Mac
Well,
Jones.
I'm saying if we don't know by Sunday if Joe Burrow is going to be out, and
Right,
you're
right.
waiting until Monday, the Bucks play on Monday at
Oh, that's a good
7:15.
point. That's a good point. Yeah.
The Rams play at 8:15, so you'll know before the Bucks and Eagles kick off
Right.
if Joe Burrow is playing. If he's not
Right.
playing, just start Baker Mayfield. Baker's out
Right.
there. Yeah,
Yeah, Baker's definitely out there. I pretty much saw him in all my leagues, besides the
yeah.
deep league I have. But yeah, man. I think that pretty much covers it. I think this is our longest show we had so far,
There's a
56
lot of
minutes.
information to cover. A lot of
A lot of
information to
a
cover.
lot of information to cover. I mean, I think we did well. I mean, just remember, there's no crying in fantasy.
There's
So
no
I
crime
mean,
in fantasy.
you could watch this show and take it what it's worth, but at the end of the day, we could be right or wrong. There's no
Yep.
crying in fantasy.
Don't come crying to us. That's for
Right,
sure.
for sure, for sure.
All right, Sean, we're out
All right.
on the week 4.